Welcome, Mike.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you here today as well. So first question that we are going to have for you today. We know vehicle electrification of all types is absolutely critical to reducing our carbon emissions. However, there's more to it than that because it's about clean air for cities as well, which, you know, we saw this during COVID times as cities, their air pollution almost just went away. How can cities take advantage of this situation, something everyone's noticed, being clean air, and use this to accelerate the shift towards electric vehicles?
Yeah, thanks, James. Great question. I think, really clean air is absolutely fundamental. So it's what we're trying to accomplish. And air quality has this, for better or worse, has the benefit of being a much more tangible and visible on a daily basis than issues like climate. So you said, like, this spring in March and April, we had this really powerful moment where we had this incredibly clean air. And I think it really helped give people a vision of what a clean transportation, clean energy future can look like. But then here in Colorado, like in so many other parts of the Western United States, we've been having a terrible wildfire season, which is of course exacerbated by climate change. So we have this like really recent stark contrast between this really clean air in the spring, and then 2 days ago, like I couldn't see the mountains in Denver. Like they're because of wildfire smoke and then general haze. So it's this really interesting, clear contrast that we can use to kind of sell or talk to the public about the benefits of clean transportation and electric vehicles. But it does take more than electrification kind of mentioned. So I know in Denver and a lot of cities, we focus a lot on mobility first. So, walking, biking, transit, the cleanest mile is the one not driven. So especially if it's a individually owned, single occupancy gasoline vehicle. But the reality is we have this incredibly short time frame to reduce our carbon emissions. So we need to, both drastically reduce driving and miles driven, but also just significantly ramp up EV adoption. Sarah was, kind of talking about budgetary challenges, and unfortunately, Denver's in that same boat. So we're trying to think about how we can be creative. How do we keep on moving forward with EV adoption in the city in these kind of budget times? And so we're looking, for example, to do more partnerships with the private sector. So having a third party come in and site stations on city properties. The city might not have capital dollars to contribute to install more stations, but they can provide city properties which can be great destinations for the public to go. We're also trying to partner as much as possible with our electric utility, Excel Energy. They're developing a whole bunch of great programs around supporting charging stations. So we're trying to work with them to reduce our cost and make sure our capital dollars that we do have stretch further. But it's a tricky time. So I think with trying to figure out what the new normal is in transportation in this kind of COVID world. And one thing we try to think about is trying to make sure that as these transportation needs shift and are changing, that we're trying to meet people where they are for their mobility needs. So it's interesting. We've seen a lot of challenges in that people are less likely, or lots of less transit ridership. So that's a big challenge. So we're also trying to think, are there other mobility opportunities? So things like electric bicycles have seen a big uptick over the last few months. Also, even electric car sharing has been on the rise. We're working on that in Denver. So I don't know, there's lots of different pieces, but yeah, we're really trying to do everything we possibly can to keep on pushing forward, keep all our programs running, and just trying to be creative and flexible as we can so we can kind of get to that cleaner air future that we briefly got to experience this spring.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Before I go on, I do want to ask the audience, please make sure you submit your questions for Mike. There's so much knowledge that he has. So please throw some questions down on the Q&A and let's ask, let's tap into this deep knowledge. So the first question I'd like to ask here is, does Denver actually have some unique challenges to EV adoption? Perhaps it's cold, perhaps it's, elevation. Are any of them challenges that you see?
I think, and I don't know that it's unique to Denver, lots of cities have the same challenges, but the first question I get a lot of the time when I talk to someone about electric vehicles is they always want to know, can I go to the mountains and back
Right.
in my EV? That's for people living in the Denver metro area, going to the ski resorts in the winter, going hiking and camping in the summer. Like that's why so many people move to this area. So that's, I
Mm,
think, certainly not a unique challenge, but certainly that's one of the first questions we get from people who want to buy an EV. They're like, well, I'd like an EV, but can it take me to, the ski resorts in the winter, and can I get back?
mhm,
And so making sure, we are partnering as much as possible with those destinations outside of the city. So people obviously don't stop driving when they hit the Denver city limits, but
mhm,
making sure that we, as much as possible, are making sure we're working with state and private sector to put charging stations along highways, at
mhm.
destinations in the mountains where people go, so that they kind of have that assurance that they can make kind of the most important trip for Denverites and people living in the area, that most important trip, making sure they have the confidence to make that kind of like fundamental trip of their lives is really key to EV adoption in Denver, I would say.
Actually, one thing I did see a little while ago on YouTube was a YouTube channel that's based in Denver with their EV. They actually started at the mountain, and then by the time they got back into Denver, they had more range than when they started because they went down the mountain. So I thought that was pretty cool. So now, next question: do you see any political divide in EV adoption? Obviously you have to work with both sides of politics. When you're spreading the message of EVs, how do you appeal to different sides?
I think, Sarah, I think was hitting on some of there's so many different benefits to electric vehicles. My work focuses mostly on climate. So
Mhm.
that, for better or worse, has become a kind of a political issue.
Right.
For worse, it is. But as I was saying, like the clean air, we look at, say, polling in the city of Denver, environmental issues that are important to people. Clean air is, always looks a lot better. More people say they are really concerned about air quality. So we definitely broadcast that message a lot, the clean air benefits of electrification, because I think that message resonates to just about everyone. Everyone can look out and see the days in Denver in the summer where you can't see the mountains. And they know that's not good. I'm breathing that. My children are breathing that. So, that's obviously a message we use a lot and talk about. And I think then, the economics are always helpful too. I mean, I think there's lots of different messages. And I think we do, while a lot of people in Denver are very concerned about environmental issues and climate, we recognize it's not everybody. And so we kind of try to push all those messages out there, and we do kind of target that message. If we know we're going to talk to different groups of people, we might, emphasize one message more than the other one.
Totally. Now, question here from Jim Pegg. Has Denver looked at supporting the electrification of contractor fleets by providing incentives such as more points on an RFP, such as, say, submitting for garbage trucks or other city tenders that might happen? What happens in that process?
So I think that's something, I mean, it's interesting. We're looking right now at a kind of a micro transit project for next year in the city, and we're trying to figure out how can we make sure that project, as much as possible, is electrified. So
Mm,
that's something we're actually working on. It's funny you kind of asked that. We're working on an RFP right now to think, okay, how can we put a system in there to incentivize whoever that operator is going to be to electrify. It might not be the only, it's not the deciding factor, but it's part of the equation when we're trying to provide these contracts and looking at, can we encourage people who are bidding for city work and things like that to use electric vehicles. And then, I think our role also in that is to try to support them by making sure that there is, more infrastructure available for charging and help them get through, their own process. If they're a private company, how can they get access to charging? And there's grants already available in Colorado, but we also work to help, your average company doesn't know how the grants work. So we always are very interested in partnering with them and like helping them through the grant process so they can, get the incentives that are out there already.
Very cool. Well, Mike, thank you very much for all your thoughts, and you know, we really appreciate your time today. We've got some questions for everyone between each other of the panelists. So, Sarah from Mike Salisbury, would be good to know about the value of having an internal champion within the city. Mike, what are your thoughts on having a champion within the city that promotes electric vehicles?
I think it's absolutely critical. I think having champions, I guess I am the EV champion in some ways, and that's super helpful. I'm lucky that I get just to work on EVs with my city work, but it's critical to have champions at all across the city. And I think that's part of what it's been great working Denver as an American Climate Cities Challenge city like Charlotte. And so we've had some support from them. And it's really about building up champions across city departments. So it's not just me and my Office of Climate and Sustainability talking about EVs. It's someone in our transportation department, someone in our general services department, people in our fleet program, and then on up to different elected officials. I think obviously having them be really engaged and excited about electric vehicles is absolutely fundamental, because at the end of the day, like, no one does anything because Mike Salisbury tells them to do something. I rely on those relationships I build with other EV champions, but also getting our elected officials who are really at the head of this to also be excited and to really show leadership and encourage other people across the city to do more with electrification.
Very cool. Thanks, Mike. Erica, if you can remain on, I know you've got a question for Mike here, and I know it's a similar question, just building on from what you've said. If you can read that out for Mike.
Yeah. So hey, Mike, I'm curious to know if you guys have seen any impact in passenger light duty vehicle sales for EVs, because I know that Colorado is really leading the way in new vehicle sales nationally. I'm just curious to see how consumers in your region have responded.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's an interesting one. I think that we've been seeing, obviously, when COVID first happened, there's a pretty big dip in all vehicle sales. I know that Colorado is dramatically different than the rest of the country in that sense. We did kind of see that EVs kind of at least maintain their kind of normal sales percentage that they had been at over that time. But we have seen, I think, it start to do as in the last couple of months as people have started buying vehicles again. We have seen EV sales kind of continue to go in a positive direction. I think we're just kind of digging out from the hole where people weren't buying vehicles for a long time. But I think we're doing okay. Still need to be doing more to meet our targets. But I think it's moving in the right direction in Colorado as far as people are ramping back up again.
I know, Catherine, while you're here, you've got a question for Mike about EVSE installations in low-income communities and ride-sharing and connected things. Please ask Mike those.
Yes, I have read enough to be dangerous, Mike, and would love to learn more from you on how Denver is using that CARES funding to put EVSE infrastructure in low-income communities, excuse me.
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, we were really excited. We applied, and my office in the city applied, and through the city of Denver, we got some funding through the Federal CARES Act to implement an expansion of an electric car sharing program in the city of Denver, focused on under-resourced communities. These are, looking places where we have different equity maps of the city that are kind of under-resourced, don't have great transportation options. So what we're trying to do is we're working with a local nonprofit car sharing company that's really excited about electrifying their fleet of vehicles. And we are going in and putting in some stations and then helping them purchase the electric car share vehicle. So it's going to be going into 5 different communities in the city of Denver. And we're in the stretch of moving extremely quickly. For anyone who is familiar with lots of city governments, doing a project like this in like 4 months' time is kind of nuts, but it's kind of fun and interesting. And as you were saying, Erica, just give us problems and we'll find ways to get around them quickly. But it's a really exciting program, and it gets to the idea of like trying to figure out how we improve mobility for all of Denver residents and really focus on supporting people who don't have as many transportation options, who don't own their own individual vehicle, and also who might be a little hesitant to be getting back onto transit in this kind of COVID world we're in. So it's a super exciting project, and we're really, looking forward to actually getting them implemented by the end of the year. Fingers crossed.
Now, one thing, I'm going to put you all on the spot. I want each of you to give like a very brief 1 second, a few words or one sentence summary of what you think, the future of the cities is with electric vehicles. Mike, what are your closing thoughts here today?
Really excited. I think the big theme I want to hit on is it's all going to be built on the partnerships that we have. We cities, we're not going to do this alone. Absolutely not. So working with people like Asaf in the private sector, but working with, utilities, other private businesses who are part of this, other government entities, nonprofits. There's so much that needs to be done, but I think we all are getting better and more innovative in how we work together to bring all the dynamic change we need to bring to get the EV numbers where they need to be.